first part of the training course is all about crafting your message. But why are we talking about this? This is a course about online presentation, right? Wrong. If you don't have a well-crafted, meaningful and inspiring story, all our tips about online presentation and fancy technology will not make a difference. So it's crucial to start with that. In the following modules, we will guide you step by step through this presentation. First, we talk about knowing your audience. Yes, a good speaker isn't there for him or herself. No, a good speaker serves the audience. Secondly, you learn the importance of defining your goal. Do you want your audience to learn something? Do you want them to get inspired? Do they need to take some actions? Knowing upfront makes sure that you'll have the result and the impact you are looking for. Then we'll create the content. What content do you want to amplify? What content do you want to drop? This is a tough process and probably the core to making awesome online presentations. Once you have the pieces of the content ready, you are ready to make a lasting impression. We'll talk about strategies to make your content stick. A good presenter serves his or her audience. You might think, huh? Really? But yeah, you heard it correctly. Look at it as an interview for a job. Have you done one of those in the last few years? Yeah? In that case, think for a moment what you have done before you went there. Right, you did some research on the company you were applying for. Maybe you even have researched the person that would interview you. It's just good practice. The same logic goes for preparing a presentation. The better you know your peeps, the better you can create something they will remember. It might be that you do a bit of this step intuitively, but we want you to make it a conscious process. We have two tools on offer for you: the audience analysis and the audience mapping. The first one is the audience analysis. It's actually just a bunch of simple questions that will help you to put yourself in the shoes of your audience. After all, if you don't know them, how can you serve their needs? Here's a set of questions we often use. Who will join my presentation? What keeps my audience up at night? How can my keynote or my presentation solve their problem? Why would the audience want to listen to me? And what about my input they might create resistance on? Let's apply this to ourselves, to this course. Our audience is a very diverse group of people, but they all have in common that they want to learn more about online presenting. But we do know that they want to do a good job and invest some time and energy into it. Why else would they join? We think people want to listen to us because they have a long experience in communicating complex information, and we have spent quite some time online looking at and giving online information. Our audience might resist on a number of aspects. It might be that it's too much of a time commitment. They might even feel that some aspects of this course don't apply to them because of the specificity of their context. Potentially, some people might feel resistance about the IT that comes with online presenting. Voila! In short, that's it for us. Now that we know this, we adapt our course accordingly. And now it's your turn. Get ready for your first assignment. Pause this video, take a piece of paper and fill in the answers to the questions. Don't worry if you feel blocked. This is an invitation to empathize with your audience and to step into their shoes for a moment. Keep in mind, the more information you have, the better you will be prepared. Was it easy? We've run this exercise with over 1,000 participants, and very often we notice a certain degree of discomfort. As a speaker or presenter, we are used to starting with the question, what do I want to bring? Unfortunately, this makes that often we forget about people we are speaking to. Good. We start to sense into the audience. You'll never make that mistake again. So let's take it a step further with the audience mapping. This has two parts. The first mapping is about identifying how knowledgeable they are. Will you have the top of the crop? Or do you bring something totally unheard? Or is your audience composed of newbies? It can even be that you have a mixed group. Based on this assessment, you can later decide at what knowledge level to start and how quickly you can progress in your speech. In your case, for example, we have no information on your previous knowledge about online presenting. You might be a guru with hundreds of presentations behind your belt, or you might be a total newbie. However, we can assume that many people have some experience with presenting, but that the online aspect of it is probably new for many of you. We have determined how much our audience already knows about your topic. So let's have a look at how connected your audience is with you or your story. Do they believe you will bring something of interest? Or do you anticipate skepticism or resistance to your message? If the latter is true, by taking time to connect with the audience emotionally, you will ensure they are focused and engaged when you get to your main point. You have signed up for this course, so it's safe to assume that you are connected to what we want to share with you. So, lucky us, we don't have to work harder to get at this point. Now let's apply this on the audience of your upcoming presentation. Take a new piece of paper and copy the 2 lines you see on this slide. Put the movie on pause and put a cross where you think your audience is located. Do this for the knowledge scale and for the connection scale. If you have a heterogeneous group, it can be that you have a number of crosses. Like so. Anderson writes in its book TED Talks, the official TED Guide to Public Speaking, that there are 2 ways to prepare a good presentation. The wrong way and the right way. The wrong way is to put everything in your story and then shorten the level of detail. You might think, well done, I've covered everything. But a presentation that has everything doesn't work. It is simple math, actually. Too many topics equals too little explanation. The good way is to cut back on the topics and to define what is the goal of my presentation. Do you want to demonstrate something, explain a process, convince them, or maybe even scare your audience? In other words, what is your end in mind? Being crystal clear about your goal will help you guide your other decisions and ensure that you have a focused and memorable message. Here are 2 questions to help you. After people listen to you, what feelings do you want to leave your audience with? And 2, which actions do you want them to take after hearing your talk? Yeah, I know, these are questions that we usually don't ask ourselves before making a presentation. For this course, we want you to feel excited about your learning. We want you to feel creative and confident, and we want you to feel that you had some fun. So that's about the feelings. The actions we want you to take after this course are: craft your message based on the needs of your audience, organize the right setup, and think about the specific aspects of presenting online. For you, it can be that you want your audience to change their view about a specific topic. Or maybe you want them to practice a new technique. It might even be that you just want them to go and find more information. Whatever it may be, it is important that you think about it. So let's apply this again to your reality. Take another piece of paper and make a list of the feelings you want to instill in your audience. Make another list of what actions you want them to take after listening to you. Most of us are not used to describing feelings. So we've made a cheat sheet called the emotion wheel, and we believe this might help you with naming what feeling you want to evoke. So put this video on pause and go to work. Now you know what feelings you want your audience to have. You also know which actions you want them to take. And we are sure you also know a lot about the topic you are going to talk about. So let's piece it all together and define our focus. This focus should be short and to the point. Let's make a small example so you can see what we mean. I once saw an episode of Scrubs. You might know it. It's a TV series that is a parody on the many Doctor series you had in the 1990s. Think Dr. House or ER. If you don't know it and you have some spare time, take a look at it. I found it really funny. In this one episode, they were going to put somebody asleep under hypnosis. So let's use this as a case. Imagine you are the doctor who came up with this approach and you are asked to speak about it at the Euroanesthesia Congress. You have done your audience research and you came to realize that most of the people that will hear your talk are very skeptical and they don't know anything about the approach. In this case, your focus could be to convince them that anesthesia through hypnosis is a valid option. However, if the audience is already convinced, I might direct my focus to show my audience how hypnosis can work as an anesthetic. As you see, the focus of my talk changed because the needs of my audience are different. Imagine how boring it would be to listen to a presentation on how to apply it if you already know how it's done. Or how annoying it would be to listen to somebody who's trying to convince me of its use when I'm actually already convinced. Capiche? Your turn again. Look at your audience analysis and at your topic and write down what will be the focus of your presentation. Focus for your task. That means that you can start digging into the content. You need to sit and work with it, but not overwork it. You need to put all your ingredients in and make sure that they form a coherent story that has an impact. Creating amazing content takes time. We often hear this. A few rough notes are all I need to prepare. I know my topic. I don't actually need to work out my presentation because I'm confident that I will find the right words in front of my audience. No. Actually, this is not really how it goes for most people. When you're under stress of delivering structure, words and connections don't just appear. They need work, thinking and puzzling. If you don't do that, there's a good chance the following will happen. Reflecting on what you want your people to tweet about your talk, or what you want them to tell in one sentence to their partner, forces us to define our big idea. You'll want to boil it down to something that is easy to understand and repeat. You might be thinking right now, but that's the same thing as we just did with defining our focus. Well, not exactly. The difference is that we're changing the point of view. We're moving from our perspective as a speaker into something that will stick with the audience. If you look at your Scrubs example, there our focus was to convince your audience that anesthesia through hypnosis is a valid option. This is a statement that starts from the speaker. When we shift our attention to the audience, we get something very different. From the audience perspective, it will be something like, wow, I'm definitely going to try this hypnosis thing in the future. Or, I will register for a training so I can acquire the basics of this. Keep in mind, it should be so short you can tweet it. Now take a moment to write down your big idea. And remember, keep it simple and repeatable. Good. You defined your big idea. This is the one thing that your listeners will share when they're asked what's their main takeaway. But imagine they would have a bit more time than for just one sentence. What comes next? Next would be 1, 2, or 3 key messages that underpin your big idea. Yep, you heard it well, only 3. We often overestimate the audience's capacity to comprehend, process, and remember large amounts of information in a short amount of time. This is especially the case on an event where there are a multitude of speakers over several days. I can hear you thinking, not me. So I will challenge you. Think about the last conferences or meetings you attended. Can you sum up more than 3 key points of the main speakers? You probably didn't manage, right? Well, if you are like most people, that's normal. But you might be the exception that proves the rule. So these 3 key messages are the backbone of your story. In our Scrubs example, I would put as key points: 1. It has been tested. 2. It is safe. And 3. You can learn it too. What are those key points for your presentation? After this video, take a bunch of post-it notes and write down your key points. You can do that also with markers and paper or on a digital whiteboard like Mural. Then take those post-its and place them next to each other on a horizontal line. Voila, that's your task before you continue with the next part of this video. I know, you have been waiting for it. But now it's the time to bring your graphs, numbers, arguments, images and examples. You still have the post-it notes close, right? Good. After this very short video, you will write down all the information you want to share in your presentation on these post-its, or on the mural if you went that way. Go nuts on it. In this phase, it's okay to focus on quantity and not on quality. There's only one rule. You can only have 1 item on each post-it. Why? So you can move them around later, because this is what you'll do next. You'll take all the post-it notes and stack them vertically under the key message they belong to. If they don't fit under any of those, they might not belong in your presentation. I will continue with my small diagnosis of you. Besides the hoarder syndrome, you probably also suffer from the curse. The curse of knowing. Yes, you heard that correctly. You are cursed with knowledge. How do I know this? First of all, because you're probably a smart person who knows a lot about the topic you're talking about. But also, everybody who is an expert on something has the same condition. We call it cursed because we cannot remember how it was not to know. When you know, you just know. Think about a physicist who deals with subatomic particles on a daily basis. She might assume that everybody knows what quarks are. She's cursed. It's difficult to imagine some people don't know about quarks. I suppose you know about that. So how does this curse manifest itself? Think about endless and difficult graphs, slides and slides of data, huge piles of detail, and many words of which you have no clue what they mean. We've all seen some of those in our professional careers, and who knows, maybe even in your private life. So how do you avoid being influenced by the curse in your next presentation? Before sorting your information and deciding what stays and goes, you first need to check your audience mapping. Remember those 2 lines you did in the beginning where you put the crosses? And especially when your audience is spread, sitting in the middle or on the left part of this axis, make sure you adapt to their level and the connection they have to your story. Now you're ready. So go to your post-its and decide what you keep and what goes. Keep in mind, avoid jargon and don't assume people know. Explain when necessary. You are the worst judge for checking if your story is interesting and understanding. Luckily, a very famous physicist comes to rescue here. Richard Feynman. You might know him. He's known for winning the Nobel Prize for fundamental work in quantum electrodynamics. So, pretty smart guy, I would say. He was also known for his spectacular way of making complex things understandable. He developed the Feynman technique, a quite famous learning method. We will slightly adapt this method with the intention of making presentations understandable for your audience. It consists out of 4 simple steps. Identify the subject you want to talk about. Great, you've done that already. Then, find a toddler or the equivalent of one. In other words, find somebody that doesn't know what you're talking about, but that is a good representation of your audience, and have them read your script or explain to them what you're going to present. Then, ask them to identify what are the gaps, or in this case, what is not clear. And in your last step, you improve the text or the presentation until you're completely through the text and everything is crystal clear. In case you get confronted with some jargon, that's normal. We all use it. I will not shock you if I tell you that it's better not to have these words in your presentation. Your audience will not understand them. This is even more true for an online presentation. We already mentioned that one of the challenges of online presentations is that you can't see the reactions of your audience, so you cannot see if something is not clear. There are 2 ways of dealing with this. 1, you explain the word the first time you use it. Or 2, replace the word by a more known synonym. Keep on doing this until you manage to go through your whole presentation and it's clear and understandable. Now you are ready to bring it to your audience. We're moving on. If everything went well, you know now what your audience wants and needs. You have a focus for your talk, you have some key points, and you also have supporting content. However, you still need to take it a step further. Having a bunch of interesting facts and ideas will not be enough to achieve your goals to change people's behavior or opinion. You will need to glue all these pieces together to a coherent and compelling story. You want to make sure that it sticks. Imagine your presentation is the coverage of a tennis match, but instead of seeing the game accompanied by enthusiastic presenters, you would not see the actual tennis match. Instead, you get the following. On the first line, you can see the server, Bugs, gets his first serve in and hits it to the tee in the service box. There are 5 strokes in the point and Bugs wins it by hitting a backhand. He loses the second point by hitting an unforced backhand error into the net. He wins the third point because his opponent hits a forehand into the net. He wins the fourth point by hitting a backhand drop shot. Would you keep watching this if it was on TV? Is this engaging and interesting? I don't think so. Nor will your audience if you bring your content like this. You can do better, and we will show you how. In 1992, Graham Gibbs looked at the attention span of students during lectures. If we look at the graph that he has created, you can see that the beginning of the lecture is the moment when people are still very much awake. So this is your time to grab your audience's attention and make them interested in what is to come. One of the biggest mistakes that speakers make is to assume that people will naturally listen because the speaker is speaking. This might have been true in the past, but those days are over. Now you have to work to get the attention. You can use the letter word tease to come up with a good opening. The T stands for testimonial. So you could start with an example, with a quote from an influential person that the audience will know and respect. The E comes from evidence. Presenting an interesting, shocking, surprising statistic or data on your subject could be a strong opening. A stands for anecdote. You've seen it before. Telling a story of someone directly affected by the subject you are talking about. The S comes from statement. Make a bold observation of the importance of your subject. And lastly, we have the E from example. Give an example of what is the real impact or consequence of what you are saying. This will make people see that what you say has a real impact. Just make sure that whatever you pick, it's appropriate for your presentation and that it's thought-provoking or challenging for the audience. Go on, you know what to do. Put this video on pause and look for a great opening for your presentation. Now it is time to find a logical and engaging sequence for the content of the middle part. For this course, for example, we have spent hours and hours moving around the different bits and pieces of content. This tweaking process, trying to tell this way, changing the order, testing in this way, getting feedback from peers. Sometimes the order is logical. For example, if there's a clear sequence to your story, in this case you start with the past situation, you move on to the current situation, and you end with how the future looks like. But this is by no means the only possible way. You could also start with the future, highlighting how beautiful it looks if everybody would do what you say, or how grim it would be when they don't. Sometimes your audience will need to understand key message 1 in order to understand what comes next. Just make sure that it will make sense for your audience. Let's go back to the research of Gibbs. Just before the end of the lecture, the attention of the students went back up. They know that the end usually brings some interesting information. So again, take advantage of the situation. Instead of firing a dry "thank you," consider launching the fireworks of final passionate thoughts from the podium. Here's a few things you can do. Challenge your audience to apply what you have told them in the speech. Or refer back to the story you told in the beginning, but which you didn't complete. Pick up the story and close it around your theme. Close with humor, always works. Summarize your 3 key points. Recap what you've said for your audience. And lastly, tell them what they have learned. This may seem obvious, but it's really powerful. The difference between ordinary and extraordinary is just that little bit of extra. We love this quote. We use it all the time. You can feel this difference between ordinary and extraordinary when you're visiting a restaurant or when you're having contact with a customer service. But this also applies to presentations. What makes a presentation memorable? How can you leave a lasting impression? In our case, that little bit of extra are the visuals. We love using visuals to help make our content stick. And we hope you like it too. Another way of making sure your message sticks is to make sure that your story appeals to people's minds and hearts. Yes, the hearts. Some presenters are very comfortable bringing emotionally engaging speeches. For others, the mere idea of including emotional contents gives them the shivers. They fear they might not be taken serious or that they'll be seen as ridiculous. Now, especially for the rationalists among us, there's a good reason to engage the audience's heart. Research has shown that feelings and thinking are not so neatly separated in the brain. All mental activities involve both cognition and emotion. When you're speaking to the hearts and the minds of people, it enhances memorization of the content and it helps people to focus. But watch out! Don't go all crazy including emotional stories in your presentation. Emotions can have a positive, a negative, a happy or a sad effect. And sadly, the brain reacts more powerful to negative situations than positive situations. Playing the negative emotional card can be dangerous and can leave your audience anxious or even have them shut down from listening. Finding the right emotional balance to your story isn't easy. Our advice would be to test it. Do a test run and ask for honest feedback. Was it too serious? Too funny? What feelings did my presentation invoke for you? Here are some examples of emotional content. Stories and anecdotes, metaphors and analogies, thought-provoking questions, slow reveals, they create surprise. Our third way of making it stick is to use words, because words matter. They have the ability to capture us, they can motivate us to take actions or even change our opinion. John F. Kennedy didn't just wing it when he said, "Don't ask what your country can do for you, rather ask what you can do for your country." We still remember these words, even decades after. You might have heard that words are actually not so important, that only 7% of effective communication is attributed to language, while 38% depends on tone and 55% on body language. This data comes from a research done by Professor Albert Mehrabian in 1967, or better, 1976. His study is often used to show that words aren't very important. However, this is a wrong explanation of his conclusions. His experiments were about how to transfer emotions. He looked, for example, what are the reactions when somebody says, "How nice," with a happy or angry body language. In this context, the words indeed don't seem to matter too much. But generalizing this conclusion to all presentations is really absurd. And by the way, the professor is so sick of being misquoted that he put a paragraph on his website in bold asking people to stop doing this. So keep in mind, words matter, so use them wisely. One of the wonderful features of words is that they have the ability to create mental pictures. We're all visual thinkers, we think in pictures, but often we need some support to get us going. Words can help us to create those images. You can compare it with painting a picture with words. So if your audience will close your eyes during your presentation and listen to you very carefully, they should see your story emerge in front of their eyes. Beautiful, isn't it? We are turning you into artists. In a digital environment, your words need to work even harder than in a live presentation. So how to do that? You can use constructions that engage the sentences. Use constructions that engage the senses. Describe what you are sharing. Use phrases like, it looks like, or it feels like. That will help people to form their mental paintings. Be specific and avoid broad generalities. It is better to say it weighs 510 pounds or kilos than it's really big. In other words, paint a picture with your words. Make comparisons. When I was in elementary school, they told me that if we would stretch out my lungs, we could play a football match on it. That image stuck with me until today. Visual tools can help us better understand what is being said. They also have the ability to create an emotional connection with the story. If not done well, visuals can also be disturbing though. Remember our example of the tennis match from earlier on. The table didn't really tell a story, it was complicated and distracting. There was a lot of information, you didn't know where to look first, and on top of that, somebody was talking. Sorry for that. People can't read a lot of information while listening at the same time. It is as if the brain needs to make a choice. Shall I listen or shall I read the text? It's the same part of the brain that needs to process this wordy information. There's another part of our brain to process visual information. And that part is actually very, very needy. It needs a lot of attention. We are like walking visual beings. So when watching an online presentation, we need to make sure that what is seen on screen is captivating our visual attention. So what are the options for making your presentation visually appealing? Well, you of course. But often we need extra visual support to get our message across or to keep the audience's eyes stuck to the screen. Using slides is probably the most obvious one, but there are more options out there. You could use props to explain something. Take a look at how Hans Rosling uses props to talk about poverty in the world. You can also have a flip chart next to you and map out your ideas there. Or you can use a document camera. Remember those old overhead projectors? This is the updated version. I challenge you to look beyond what you're used to, and I'm sure you will make a great impression.